Здравствуйте, меня зовут Николай Боголюбов, а вы смотрите канал на волнах классики. И сегодня будет один из аудиовыпусков плейлиста начитки своей и чужой литературы, некоторых текстов. И так как на одной из последних трансляций на волнах классики меня просили снять выпуск начитки литературы на английском языке, я довольно скептически отношусь к произношению, к озвучанию подобных выпусков, но тем не менее это будет интересный опыт и еще замечательная возможность наконец-то вновь вернуться к литературе в оригинале. И для такого пробного выпуска я взял самое раннее произведение Вирджинии Вулф «A Room of One's Own». Я бы перевел этот сборник текстов как «Чья-то комната», в которой Вирджиния Вулф, насколько я понял из начального текста первой главы, интонации будет рассуждать о последующем феминизме и о том, как женщина-писатель пишет свои тексты, что нужно для этого процесса. Это также будет присутствовать в произведении. И вот первая ее проба пера в жанре потока сознания очень важны в этом тексте. А вот русский перевод, я не читал его, но знаю, что в русском переводе книгу перевели как «Комната Джейкоба», и вот это довольно несуразное название. В этом сборнике от издательства Collins Classics есть еще одно произведение, но мы начнем все-таки «A Room of One's Own». Сегодня я попробую озвучить первую главу, пропуская некоторые предисловия также на английском языке, ну а дальше посмотрим. Chapter 1. But you may say, we asked you to speak about woman and fiction. What has that got to do with a room of one's own? I will try to explain. When you asked me to speak about woman and fiction, I sat down on the banks of a river and began to wonder what the words meant. They might mean simply a few remarks about Fanny Burney, a few more about Jane Austen, a tribute to the Brontes, and a sketch of Harriet's personage under snow. Some witsems it possible about Miss Mitford, a respectful allusion to George Eliot, a reference to Miss Gaskell, and one would have done. But at second sight the words seemed not so simple. The title woman and fiction might mean, and you may have meant into man, woman, and what they are like, or it might mean woman and the fiction they write, or it might mean woman and the fiction that is written about them, or it might mean that somehow all three are inextricably mixed together, and you want me to consider them in that light. But when I began to consider the subject in this last way, which seemed the most interesting, I soon saw that it had one fatal drawback. I should never be able to come a conclusion. I should never be able to fulfill what is, I understand, the first duty of a lecturer, to hand you after an hour discourse a nugget of pure truth, to wrap up between the pages of our notebooks and keep on the mantelpiece forever. All I could do was to offer you an opinion upon one minor point. A woman must have money and a room of her own if she is to write fiction. And that, as you will see, leaves the great problem of the true nature of woman and the true nature of fiction unsolved. I have the duty of coming to a conclusion upon these two questions. Woman and fiction remain, so far as I can consent, unsolved problems. But in order to make some amends, I am going to do what I can to show you how I arrived at this opinion about the room and the money. I am going to develop in your presence as fully and freely as I can the train of thought which led me to think this. Perhaps if I lay bare the ideas, the prejudices that lie behind the statement, you will find that they have some bearing upon woman and some upon fiction. At any rate, when a subject of highly controversial and any question about sex is that one cannot hope to tell the truth, one can only show how one came to hold whatever opinion one does hold. One can only give one audience the chance of drawing their own conclusions and observe the limitations, drawing their own conclusions and they observe the limitation, the prejudice, the idiosyncrasies of the speaker. Fiction here is likely to contain more truth than fact. Therefore, I proposed making use of all the liberties and licenses of a novelist to tell you the story of the 2 days that preceded my coming here, how, bowed down by the weight of the subject which you have laid upon my shoulders, I pondered it and made it work in and out of my daily life. I need not to say that what invention, so if firm, is only a convenient term for somebody who has no real being. Lies will flow from my lips, but there may perhaps be some truth mixed up of them. It is for use to speak out this truth and to decide whatever any part of it was keeping. If not, you will of course throw the whole of it into the waste paper basket and forget all about it. Here then was I. Call me Mary Batten, Mary Satin, Mary Carmichael, or by any name you please, it is not a matter of any importance. Sitting on the banks of a river a week or two ago to find October weather, lost in thought. The color I have spoken of, woman and fiction, the need of coming to some conclusion on a subject that raises all sorts of prejudices, any positions, bowed my head on the ground. To the right and left, bushes of some sort, golden and crimson, glowed with the color, even it seemed burnt with the head of fire. One diffuse bank, the willows wrapped in perpetual illumination, their hair about the shoulders. The river reflected whatever it chose of sky and bridge and burning tree, and when the undergraduate had owed his bow thought the reflection they clothed again, completely as if we had never been. One might have said the clock round lost in thought. Thought, too, called by a prudo named the deserved, had let its line down into the stream. Its weight minute after minute, hither and thither among the reflections and the weeds. Leading the water leaved it and sank it until, you know the little tag, the sudden conglomeration of any idea at the end of one's line, and then the curtains howling of it in and the careful laying of it out. Alice laid on the grass, how small, how insignificant this thought of mine looked. The sort of fish that a good fisherman puts back into the water so that it may grow fatter and be on one day for cooking and eating. I will not trouble you with that thought now. Through, if you look carefully, you might find it for yourselves in the course of what I am going to say. But however small it was, it had nevertheless the mysterious property of its kind. Put back into the mind, it became at once very exciting and important, and as is darted and sank and flashed hither and thither, set up such a wash and tumult of idea that it was impossible to sit still. It was thus that I found myself working with extreme rapidity across a grass plot. Instantly a man's figure rose to introspect me. Now did I at first understand in the gesticulations of a serious-looking object, in a cutaway coat and even sheet, were a mind and me. His face expressed horror and indignation. Instinct rather than reason came to my help. He was a beadle. I was a woman. This was the truth. there were the pass. Only the fellows and scholars are allowed here. The gravel in the place for me. Such thoughts were the work a moment. As I regained the pass, the arms of the beetle sank, his face assumed its usual repose, and thought of in the better working than gravel. No very great harm was done. The only charge I could bring against the fellows and scholars of whatever the college might happen to be was that in protection of their truth, which has been rolled for 300 years in succession, they had sent my little fish into hiding. What idea it had been that had sent me so audaciously trespassing, I could not now remember. The spirit of peace descended like a cloud from heaven, for if the spirit of peace anywhere, it is in the courts and quadrangles of Oxbridge on a fine October morning. Student thought those colleges past those ancient hells, the rushness of present seemed smoothed away. The body seemed contained in a measureless glass cabinet, thought which no sound could penetrate, and the mind freed from any contact with facts, unless one trespassed on the truth again, was at liberty to settle down upon whatever meditation was in harmony with that moment, as chance would have it. Some stray memory of some old idea about revisiting Oxbridge in the long vacation brought Charles Lamb to mind, saying Charlie said, putting a letter of Lamb's to his forehead. Indeed, among all the dead, I give you my thoughts as they came to me. Lamb is one of the most one to whom one would have liked to say, tell me then how you wrote your essays. For his and spares even to Max Berberham's, I thought with all their perfection, because of that wild fish of imagination, the lightning crack of genius in the middle of them which leave that flamed imperfect, but started with poetry. Lamb came to Oxbridge perhaps 100 years ago. Certainly he wrote, the name escapes me, about the manuscript of one of Milton's poems which he saw here. It was Lucidus perhaps, and Lamb wrote how it shocked him to think it possible that any word in could have been different from what is. To think of Milton changing the words in that poem seemed to him a sort of sacrilege. This led me to remember what I could amuse myself with guessing which word it could have been the Milton had altered, and why. It then to me that very manuscript itself, which Lamb had looked, it was only a few hundred years away, so that one could follow Lamb's footsteps across the quadrangle to that famous library with the treasure it's kept. Moreover, I recollected as I put this plan into execution, it is in the famous library that manuscript of Thurkay Esmond. It's all preserved. The critics often say that Esmond's Ray most perfect novel, but the affectation of the style with in imitation of the 18th century hampers one so far as I can remember. Unless indeed the 18th century style was nature to Thackeray, a fact that one might prove by looking at manuscript and slipping whatever the alterations were for the benefit of the style of the scenes. But then one would have to decide what is style and what is meaning, a question which but here was actually at the door which leads in the library itself. I must have opened it, for instantly there like a garden angel bearing the way with a flutter of black going instead of white wings, deprecation, silvery, kindly gentleman who regretted in a low voice as he waved. We beg the ladies are only admitted to the library if accompanied by a fellow of the college or finished with a letter of introduction. That a famous library has been cursed by a woman is matter of complete indifference to a famous library. One more. Never will I wake those echoes, never will I ask for the hospitality again. I wrote, I descended the steps in anger. Still an hour remained before a luncheon, and what was one to do? Stroll on the meadows, sit by the river. Certainly it was a lovely autumn morning. The leaves were fluttering red in the ground. There was not great hardships in dawn either, but the sound of music reached my ear. Some series of celebration was going forward. The organ complained magnificently as I paced the chapel door. Even the sorrow of Christianity sounded in that serene air more like that recollection of sorrow than sorrow itself. Even the groanings of the ancient organ seemed laid in peace. I had no wish to enter had I the right, and this time the Virgin might have stopped me, demanding perhaps my baptismal certificate of a letter of introduction from the den. But the outside of these magnificent buildings is often as beautiful as the inside. Moreover, it was amazing enough to watch the congregation assembling, coming in and going out again, busying themselves at the door of the chapel like bees at the mouth of a hive. Many were in cap and gown, and some had tufts of fur on their shoulders. Others were wilting best chairs. Others, though not past middle age, seemed crazed and crushed into shapes so singular that one was reminded of those giant crabs and crayfish who have with difficulty across the sand of an aquarium. As I learned again the world, the university indeed seemed a sanctuary in which are preserved rare types which would soon be obsolete if left to fight for existence on the pavement of the stand. Old stories of all deans and all dons came back to mind, but before I had summoned up courage to whistle, it used to be said that the sound of a whistled professor instantly broke into gallop there. Venerable congregation has gone inside. The outside of the chapel remained, as you know, its heights, domes, and pinnacles can be seen like a sailing ship, always waiting, never arriving, like up at night and visible from mills for a far away across the hills. Once presumably that with its smooth lawns, its massive buildings, and the chapel itself was marked to where the graces waved at the swan rootled. Teams of horses and oxen, I thought, must have the stone in wagons from fair countries, and then with infinite labor the grey blocks in whose shade I was now standing were posted in order one on top of another, and then the painters brought their glass for the windows, and the masons were busy for centuries up on that roof with pewter and cement, spade and trowel. Every Saturday somebody must have poured gold and silver out of a purse into the ancient feasts, for they had their beer and skittles, presumably of an evening, and a stream of gold and silver, I thought, must have flowed into these court perpetually to keep the stones coming and the masons working to level, to dig, and to drain. But it was then the age of faith, and money was poured liberally to set the stones on a deep foundation, and when the stones were raised, still more money was poured in from the covers of kings and great nobles to ensure that hymns should be sung and scores taught. lands were granted, tithes were paid, and when the age of faith was over and the age of reason had come, still the same flow of gold and silver went on. Fellowships were founded, lectureships endowed. Only the gold and silver flowed now, not from the coffers of the king, but from the kitchens of merchants and any manufactures from the purses of men who had made, say, a fortune from industry and returned in their wealth a bounteous share of it to endow more chairs, more lectureships, more fellowships in the university where they had learned craft. Hence the libraries and laboratories of observations in splendid equipment of costly and delicate instruments, which now stands of glass shelves where centuries ago the grasses waved and the swine rootled. Certainly, as I strolled round the court, the foundation of gold and silver seemed deep enough. The pavement lay solidly over the wild grasses. Men with trays on their heads went busily from staircase to staircase. Gaudy blossoms flowered in the window boxes. The strains of gramophone blared out from the rooms within. It was impossible not to reflect. The reflections, whatever it may have been, was cut short. The clock struck. It was time to find one's way to luncheon. It is a serious fact. The novelists have a way of making us believe that luncheon parties are invariably memorable for something very witty that was said or something very wise that was done, but they seldom spare a word for what wise then was done. But they seldom spare a word for what was eaten. It is part of the novelist convention not to mention soup and salmon and ducklings, as if soup and salmon and ducklings were of no importance whatsoever, as if nobody ever smoked a cigar or drank a glass of wine. However, I shall take the liberty to defy that convention and to tell you that the lunch on this occasion began with soles, sunk in a deep dish over which the college cook had spread a counterpane of the cream, save that it was branded here and there with brown spots like the spots on the flanks or a door. After that came the partridges, but if this suggests a couple of belt brown birds on a plate of a mistaken. The partridges, many and various, came with all their retinue of sauces and salads, the sharp and the sweet, each in its order. Their potatoes, then as coins but not so had, the spirits folated as rochebuds, but some and no sooner had the roast and its returner been done with than the silent Syrian man, the battle himself perhaps, in a middle manifestation set before us in napkins a confession which rose and the sugar from the waves, to call it pudding and so relate it to rice and to tapioca would be an insult. Meanwhile, the windy glasses had flushed yellow and flushed crimson, had been emptied, had been filled, and thus by degrees was lit halfway down the spine, which is the seat of the soul, and that had little electric light which we call brilliance as it pops in and out upon our lips, but the more profounded, subtle, and the subterranean glow which in the rich yellow flame of rational intercourse. No need to hurry, no need to speckle, no need to anybody but oneself. We're all going to heaven, and all is of their company. It are the words how good life seemed, how sweet is. Words how trivial with this grudge of that grievance, how admirable friendship and the society of one kind, as lighting a good cigarette, one sunk among the cushions in the window seat. If by good luck there had been an ashtray handy, if one had not knocked the ash out of the window in default, if things had been a little different from what they were, one would not have seen presently a cat without a trail. The sight of that abrupt and truncated animal padding softly across the quadrangle, changed by some fluke of the subconscious intelligence, the emotional light for me. It was if someone had let fall a shade. Perhaps the excellent hawk was wrenching it halt. Certainly, as I watched the Manx cat pause in the middle of the lawn, it is as to questioned the universe, something seemed like and something seemed different. But what was like and what was different? I asked myself, listening to the talk, and to answer the question I had to think myself out from the room, back into the past before there were indeed, and to set before my eye the model of another luncheon different. Everything was different. Meanwhile the talk went on among the guests, who were many and young, some of this sex, some of that. It went off swimmingly, it went on agreeably, freely, emotionally, and as it went on, I said it again, the background of that other talk, and I matched the two together. I had no doubt that one was the descendant, the legitimate hair of the other. Nothing was changed, nothing was different, save only here I listened with all my ears, not entirely to what was being said, but to the murmur of current behind. Yeah, that was it. The chance were there before there were a luncheon party like this. People would have said precisely the same things, but they would have sounded different, because in those days they were accompanied by a sort of human nose, not articulate but musical, exciting, which taint the bellow of the words themselves. Could one set the human nose to words? Perhaps with the help of the poets one could. A book lay beside me, and opened it, I turned casually enough to Tennyson, and here I found Tennyson was singing. There has fallen a splendid tear from the patient flower at the gate. She is coming, my dove, my dear, she is coming, my love, my fate. The red rose cries, she is near, and the white rose weeps, she is late. The larkspur listens, I hear, and the lily worships, I wait. Was that when men hummed at luncheon parties before the war at the woman? My head is like a singing bird whose nest is in a rotted shoot. My head is like an apple tree whose boughs are bent with thick fruit. My head is like a rainbow shell that paded in halcyon sear. My head is greater than this, because my love is come to me. Вот, ну вот на такой замечательной ноте я хочу такое пробное с огромным количеством шероховатостей в озвучке текста Вирджинии Вулф, но вот, воспользовавшись этим замечательным шансом, я наконец-то могу охарактеризовать вообще вот этот очень важный текст Вирджинии Вулф, который когда-то продавался в азбуке классики, когда-то очень давно, и его уже нет в продаже, поэтому сейчас можно случайно вот найти на Озоне, как я нашел, я оставлю, кстати, ссылку в описании, на английском языке. Это, вот как мы понимаем из отрывка из первой главы сборника, это сборник текстов рассуждений из лекции Вирджинии Вулф о литературе, о том, какую роль играет именно писательница, женщина в литературе. Есть отсылки к Джейн Остин, к Элизабет Гаскелл, к Эллиоту. То есть идет некое сравнение женщины-писателей и мужчины-писателей, зарождаются, как я понимаю, основываясь еще и на ее другом творчестве, которое я читал и на английском, и на русском языках, ее манере повествования, то есть вот этом, с одной стороны, литературном перфекционизме, а с другой стороны, эмансипации и других чисто женских и литературных вещах. Но помимо всего прочего, здесь есть колоссальный материал советов Вирджинии Вулф, потому что она была еще и критиком, и как раз в комментариях здесь и озвучены все ее основные постулаты. Это создание модернистской литературы, которая, насколько я сейчас понимаю, хотя я могу ошибаться, корни ее лежат из поэзии, и вот как раз закончил я той части текста, в котором Вирджиния Вулф цитирует поэтов, и вот стихотворение, которое я прочитал в англоязычной форме, и это же, в общем-то, и других писателей модернизма, постмодернизма, например, Фолкнера и вот других авторов такого пошиба. И в аннотации мы можем прочитать следующее к этой книге. Lock up your libraries if you like, but there is no gate, no lock, no bolt that you can set upon the freedom of my mind. Кстати, эта фраза, по-моему, встречалась нам в тексте. Based on a lecture given at Cambridge, at first published in 1929, a room of one's own interweaves of Woolf's personal experience as a female writer with themes ranging, ну да, вот именно феминистка, from Austen and Bronte, Shakespeare's gifted and hegemony sister, Free Virginia Woolf's most impatient polemic. Я так понимаю, это вот уже во втором тексте. Came almost a decade later and broke new ground by challenging the very notions of war and masculinity. This volume combined two inspirational witty and urban essays from one literary preeminent voices. Collectively, they constitute a brilliant and lurid attack on sexual inequality. Ну, вот как раз вот эта идея в отношении литературы самой Вирджинии Вулф, того, что литература должна характеризовать на чувственном уровне окружающую действительность, а не что-то другое, вот это также отражено в этом тексте. Я не уверен, что буду вот так вот доозвучиваю этот набор до конца, но, кстати, книгу можно читать, мне кажется, отрывками, вот так вот спокойно возвращаться к тексту. В принципе, здесь всего 112 страниц, 112 pages, 113 pages. Но вот не знаю. Ну, может быть, со временем. Я выложу, наверное, где-нибудь через недельку вот этот пробный выпуск. И если вы будете прощать мне какие-то ударения, коверканные слова, которые происходят так из-за того, что текст читается впервые, и впервые это вот все так записывается, по сути, в режиме реального времени, но если все это сложится и в дальнейшем будет как-то выправляться, то, я думаю, это прекрасный способ еще и параллельно вот так вот читать подобную литературу. Спасибо большое за внимание и до встречи.